This is not meant to be an insult to Halle Berry whatsoever, but after watching X-Men 97, I don't feel like she did Storm any justice whatsoever. Welcome back everyone, or welcome if you're new. It's great to have you. I appreciate all of the support. Here at Anime and Beyond, if you don't know, we try to get into everything and anything. So let's get into X-Men 97. We're going to get into some things that I noticed and loved about the series. Then we're going to get into some trifling behavior of certain characters. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what the next season looks like. Now, like I was saying a little bit earlier, I don't feel like Halle Berry did Storm justice whatsoever. Now, I did like her as Catwoman, as far as I can remember. And I say as far as I can remember because Catwoman came out in 2004. It is now 2024. I have not rewatched that movie because I don't want to have the realization that it's horrible. Not saying that it is horrible, but just the possibility for me to feel like it's horrible is enough for me to not watch it. Anyway, I said all that to say this. X-Men 97 really changed my view on certain characters, including Storm and Rogue. Because I started off getting into X-Men through the movies, I had no idea that Storm was such a goddess. Now, X-Men Storm from the movies, I had her pretty ranked low because I wasn't really all that impressed with her. But after watching X-Men 97, like, Storm has become one of my favorites. And as far as Rogue goes, I can say the same thing as far as she was ranked pretty low for me based off the movies. But after seeing the X-Men 97 animated series, Rogue is really up there and she's one of my favorites as well. So maybe I need to treat the X-Men movies the way I treat the live action adaptations of anime and seek out the original source or the original content. Moving on, there were a few new characters to me that I'd never seen before. I've never heard of Bastion until this series, or Morph, Bishop, Cable, and especially Jubliee. All of these characters are pretty cool, but if I have to be honest, I'm still trying to figure out things about Jubliee. Now, I know that Jubliee can generate pyrotechnic energy blasts from her hands or whatever, but I'm a little bit confused on the damage that deals on her opponents. Sometimes it doesn't really seem to do much to certain characters, and then other times it seems to do a lot more damage on other characters. So I guess overall it just depends on who she's matched up with. If anyone can shed more light on that, please do. I'd greatly appreciate it. But the main thing I want to get across, and the main thing I enjoyed about this series, besides it changing my view on certain characters, is the slice of life and the personal struggles that everyone went through. Like, almost all of the X-Men characters had something going on to some degree. And I feel like the other X-Men series kind of kept it surface level, at least the ones that I have watched. So I really enjoyed seeing more personal struggles amongst the X-Men. I mean, they already struggle being mutants as is, but seeing the personal struggles really made them seem more human, if that makes sense. Like, I really loved the whole ordeal with Scott and Madelyne Pryor. That was pretty interesting. And then we had Rogue struggling between her feelings with Magneto and Gambit. Roberto da Costa, I think that's how you say his name, struggling with coming forth with his identity to his mother. He was very fearful of how his mother would feel about him being a mutant, and rightfully so, because later on we saw that he did have a right to be scared and to hide it, unfortunately. And of course, the whole struggle with Storm when she lost her powers and finding herself again, that was really beautiful and I enjoyed every second of that. And while we're on the topic of Storm, I will say Storm and Forge, that's an interesting ship. It kind of gives me a little bit of a Starfire and Robin vibe to a degree. And I mean, from what I've seen, I feel like Forge would worship and treasure the actual ground she walks on and treat Storm like the goddess that she is. I actually knew a little bit about Forge before watching this series because I read Phoenix Song Echo. And I was kind of wondering if the same adversary from Phoenix Song Echo is the same adversary in this series. And going back to the whole Magneto, Gambit, and Rogue thing briefly, I can definitely see why Rogue struggled so hard and so much, because with Magneto, on that front, she can touch him, her powers don't hurt him, he's able to negate it. But on the other hand, with the Gambit, she's not able to touch him and she craves that physical connection a lot. This series did a really good job of portraying that and portraying everyone's struggles. And honestly, I was thrilled at the idea of the mutants having Genosha, a place where they can call home, a place where they can feel like they belong. But I'll be honest, Genosha gave me Dressrosa vibes from One Piece, because it had this imagery, it was beautiful, it seemed like everything was working out, like it just felt too good to be true. And then we learned in Dressrosa, it definitely was too good to be true. And the same thing with Genosha, unfortunately. It was such a beautiful place, and it kind of sucked to see it turn into the human or mutant extinction attack. And I gotta wonder, had this not happened, would Magneto still agree with Charles' ideas and his vision? Because remember when it was first revealed at the beginning of the episode, the first episode, that Charles had left the X-Men in Magneto's care, everyone was worried, and rightfully so. But Magneto genuinely tried to do things Charles' way, and look how that turned out. But honestly, I like how they oppose each other. They have different thought process, different views on everything that's going on. It kind of reminds me of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King a little bit, but I will say I'm definitely Team Magneto. It was messed up what he did to Logan though. I do think he took that a little bit too far.
No! Magnus! For the love of God, don't do this!
Well, let's just go ahead and say he definitely took it too far. Anyway, it was nice to see the X-Men themselves, because they agreed with Magneto, kind of fighting amongst each other. It was nice to see some mutants fed up, because naturally you will get fed up after a certain point. So I felt like that was pretty realistic and relatable. And y'all, something I want to point out real quick. Cable is an interesting character. His life was basically changed because of Mr. Sinister, who I have a little bit experience with because I read a Doctor Strange comic, but Cable's life was basically messed up because Mr. Sinister infected him with this virus that he had to be sent to the future for. But what really draws me to Cable is the fact that his character has to do a lot with time travel, and the fact that he reminds me of future Trunks from Dragon Ball Z just a little bit. And I'm really intrigued by the fact that he has failed around 200 times. Like, that takes a grand toll on his mind and his mental state, I would imagine. But I feel like all of Cable's failures goes to show just how dangerous Bastion and Mr. Sinister's team up was. And he was borderline unstoppable with the Sentinels and then them being undercover at that. Like, I know he's a villain, but that's a different level of genius right there. Like, you don't even know that the humans are Sentinels until the very last second. I mean, Bastion was basically taking advantage of these humans that wanted an edge against mutants, I guess. Like, I guess they felt like their society was being taken over. Certain jobs would be replaced by mutants and things like that. So maybe Bastion packaged it completely different than what they expected. Anyway, I kind of find it funny that towards the end, Scott was really trying to talk no jutsu Bastion. And Bastion was just not on board with that. Okay, so clearly I can go on and on about this series, and I'm debating on if next season I need to just do episode by episode reviews instead of reviews in totality. But anyway, let's move on to some of the trifling behaviors we saw in this series. Alright, so trifling behavior number 1. Jean Grey really got mad at Scott for having this little meeting with Madelyne Pryor, this little psychic meeting or whatever, but she had just finished kissing Logan. That is wild to me. Now, I could be out of pocket for this, but I feel like Jean was wrong because Scott and no one else had no idea that a clone even existed. And I feel like she was also wrong for getting mad at him when Madelyne Pryor is the mother of his child. So of course something is still going to be there, and at most, okay, maybe it's emotional cheating, I guess, but they're still the same person. On the other hand, Jean physically cheated by kissing Logan. Trifling behavior number 2. It is so wild to me that Professor X or Charles really left his X-Men behind for an alien, for a woman, for love. They did not grill him enough for this, in my opinion. It was because he was taken out, or supposedly taken out, that people felt sympathy for the mutants to begin with. And I personally feel like that does more harm than good for the mutants. I mean, they're already having a hard time as is. Why make things worse? Why make it seem like they faked that to gain sympathy from the world? Because now it sounds like a ploy from their end, and that's not the case. And I have to wonder, while I do like Magneto and Charles, like Magneto pointed out, would Charles still be sprouting the same peace speech if he had seen Genosha himself from his own eyes? Unfortunately, there's really no way to know or to prove that Charles would still feel the same after seeing that happen in real time, but it would have been interesting nonetheless. Lastly, let's get into what the next season may look like. Now, I love the appearance of the other characters like Daredevil, Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, and maybe they'll get to do more in the second season. If they do get to do more, that'd be something I'm definitely looking forward to, because I love how they're expounding, and it's not just the X-Men. We're getting to see characters outside the X-Men, and that's amazing to me. I would also love to see more of the Scots and Goblin Queen, aka Madelyne Pryor and Jean Grey thing. Especially if she's able to come back, you know, kind of like Jean Grey. She is a clone of her after all. Also, it didn't quite click at first, but then I saw online that there's potentially a evil Gambit coming back next season, which would be great because I would love to see how Rogue would handle that, if she would blame herself, what their relationship would look like past that point. Not to mention, there is hint of Apocalypse coming next season. I think that was him at the end. I also had to go online to find that out because I'm unfamiliar with Apocalypse, but that's going to be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to season 2 overall, especially when it comes to finding the X-Men, because Forge presumed a lot of them to be deceased and taken out. So we're seeing on the other end, of course, Forge doesn't know, but we, the audience, know that they're in different locations, different times. So honestly, season 1 was phenomenal. I can't wait to see what they do with season 2. But anyway, that's all I have time to get into now. Maybe I'll do more videos on season 1 before season 2 comes. Who knows? It all depends. Anyway, thank y'all for all of your support. I appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe. And as usual, thanks for tuning in. Sierra Nova is out.